direct communication by an enhanced awareness of their situation or their possibilities, higher clarity because of that, or the client moves into a more resourceful state as a result of the coach's direct communication with the client. And there could be many more. These are just three of the positive impact that is mentioned here. There could be many more. Now, we are going to take a look at direct communication from this mind map, which is up on your screen. Okay. So we will talk about the different aspects of direct communication. One is, of course, the very obvious one is providing feedback. And in the same, a subset of feedback is what I call instant probes. We will look into creating certainty for the client in a coaching session. We will look into an important aspect of direct communication, which is supporting the client to reframe, and a more active role from the client, providing alternate perspectives, especially when the client is feeling stuck or they're framing things in ways that are difficult to process further. We will talk about respecting the client's words. That is another very important and direct aspect of direct communication. And the one that we just mentioned a few minutes back about the powerful usage of metaphors and similes and analogies, which is the far side of direct communication, quite indirect, in fact, quite indirect, yet serve the purpose of creating a higher, positive awareness for the client. So before we dive into the feedback aspect, I would like to connect direct communication with the two very important sibling of direct communication from the competency family. And that is, of course, active listening and building trust and intimacy with the client. I'm sure these two topics are going to be covered by a presenter in the coming days, so we are not going to dive much into it. But just to say that direct communication by itself does not stand unless it is standing on the shoulders of active listening and trust and intimacy. In the absence of trust and intimacy, most of our direct communication will be perceived as very blunt communication. And the client can very well resent the communication and even resent the coach. So we know the important bedrock of almost all competencies to truly play out is the right that we have earned with the client in the few initial meetings or sessions about building real trust and deep intimacy with the client. And the second aspect that direct communication is standing on is active listening. Because in the absence of active listening, we don't have much information to communicate directly that is going to be useful to the client. In fact, in the absence of active listening, we might be miscommunicating when we are using direct communication. So we are taking these two things for granted. In this call, we are saying that, the coach is demonstrating high level of trust and intimacy with the client, or enjoys high levels of trust and intimacy with the client. And he is actively listening very powerfully to the client's expression. And then direct communication is significant. So we move into one aspect of direct communication, which is respecting the client's words. Now, this is obvious that words have very different meanings, and even feelings for the client. So one aspect of direct communication is to respect the client's words, so we use the same words that the client uses. If the client says spirituality or the client says religion, we don't replace it with spirituality. If the client says wellness, we don't say that it's fitness. We stick with the client's words because they're very sacred. And the other part, we know why we mirror the client's language, because when we replace the words with ours, and if it's not the right words and they have a very different meaning, now the responsibility to correct the coach's understanding falls on the client. And now the client will have to really work overtime to clarify for the coach. So this is very disruptive, as we know. I'm just noticing some background noise on the call. So whether your mic need to be muted, or if you're about to contribute, please feel free. Check your mic, please. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. That's quiet again. Thank you. Okay. So respecting words, using the client's words and not replacing them. Okay. So that is one aspect of direct communication, which ensures the flow of the conversation move forward and it's client-centric, and the coach and the client doesn't feel that they need to really put an effort to make the coach understand what they meant. That was really the intent. Okay. When we look into the other aspect, and that's creating certainty, is another function of direct communication. And this is very basic, as we know, that we understand that in order for our cerebral cortex in a coaching session to work very well, okay, and for the client to think through systemically with the complete faculties, that we know that the conscious mind needs certain level of information about what is going to unfold. And in the absence of that, they're really not able to explore their complete thinking, or let alone dive into their subconscious intelligence. So we create certainty in a coaching session by setting the time boundaries, setting the boundary conditions, what's going to unfold, who has got the control, how this is going to work out. We state all those things by creating certainty, and that's a part of direct communication. And another part of direct communication is explaining the purpose of a particular tool or a process or an exercise that the coach might be offering to the client. So the way that you introduce something, and that creates certainty. So I'm going to just demonstrate what happens when we don't create certainty with respect to our own communication. So here I go. This is just role playing, but do listen to it. Imagine I'm going to ask you, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of this session, it'll be wonderful if I can get all your email IDs and personal telephone number. Thank you so much. Now, how does that sound? I hope it was a respectful enough request. But as you listen to this request, what was going in your mind? Would anybody like to come out of mute and respond to that?
Well, it felt you're taking an opportunity, to get in touch with the participants.
Yes, absolutely. There seems to be, in the absence of certainty, the mind will make up an intention, which may be correct, which may not be correct. So the mind fills in blanks. So thank you very much for saying that. So we don't know what the intention of this request is. So we say, for the purpose of ensuring that you get, the thinking around direct communication from my coaching practice, would you mind sharing your personal email IDs or telephone number? And then you have the right to say yes or no. And so we create certainty by always stating the purpose of a request before we make the request. So we might say in a coaching conversation, if you're going to use a tool, for the purpose of, so that you can capture ideas visually and we can brainstorm together, may I offer? And you say what you want to say. So that's one aspect of creating certainty with your process, your tools, etc. Moving on, we look at another aspect of direct communication, which is feedback. And then we will also talk about instant probes. So feedback, what opportunities do we have as coaches to provide feedback that will positively impact the client or the client's awareness? Would someone like to throw something from their coaching practice? What kind of feedback opportunities do we have as coaches?
Hi, this is Shabri here, and in a coaching assignment where the client has already engaged in a process of getting 360-degree feedback. So there's data from there. There's maybe a psychometric, etc. So as a coach, I go in prepared to share my insights and give feedback on what I am seeing based on the data. So that is one example that comes to mind. In some cases, I've also collected feedback from their supervisors over a telephone conversation, and it's not a structured 360-degree feedback gathering process, but it has been part of the contract. And so that is also an opportunity to share in terms of what did I hear from their key stakeholders.
Wonderful. That's a great example, Shabri. Thank you for sharing with the group. So we look at feedback. One is that the feedback that is available from the ecosystem, from the environment, and that is processed through the coach. And coach does two things. One is that look at the feedback very objectively and look at what is emerging, any patterns, any themes that is emerging. And the coach is also careful, these patterns that are emerging potentially does not influence their own judgment about the client. Okay. So we keep a distance from those observations, yet we own them. Okay. So that is wonderful. That's a great example of a feedback opportunity. Another part of feedback is that we facilitate feedback with the client by asking open-ended questions. Maybe we show the same 360 to the client and first ask, okay, as you observe this, what patterns are emerging for you? Or what is becoming evident for you? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? What is surprising for you to learn? What do you concur with? So we ask a lot of open-ended questions, sometimes to facilitate the client to pick up their own feedback. And then we also place as an observation our own feedback. So that's a wonderful opportunity for direct communication. And the second part of opportunity is that when you're engaged with the client over a few coaching sessions in a coaching engagement. And it's a great privilege as a coach because we have a ringside view of the client, who they are becoming, what are their values, what are their aspirations, what are their fears, what are their beliefs. Sometimes we also see, glimpses of their limiting beliefs and assumptions. All that we are seeing, especially when you have strong, deep trust and intimacy with the client. Each coaching session reveals more who the client is at different levels. So we have tremendous source of information about the client. And many times the client is aware of many of these. And sometimes the client is not fully aware or they're blocked. For example, limiting beliefs or assumptions that has been honored for a very long time almost feel like the truth. And we know that as human beings, we don't question truth. It's our truth that we forget, but we don't question truth. So beliefs almost become truth for the client. So if it's a truth, it's easy. We don't have to investigate it any further. But in a coaching session, over and over again, as a coach, you are seeing certain beliefs, certain assumptions. You are sometimes seeing an incongruence between what the client says they want and some of their beliefs which are coming in the way, which they are not aware. Or you're seeing an incongruence between what the client says and what they do, the say-do gap. Sometimes it's a belief coming in the way of a desire. I'm saying, I really want to do this, but I feel I'm too old for it now. Or I feel it's going to be too difficult. So we see any incongruences, any patterns that is emerging from coaching session to session. For example, promises to take action and then partially completes action or sometimes does not complete action at all. And there's a tendency to externalize the reasons. And there's always a valid reason. But you're seeing a pattern. As coaches, we know that we need to be careful that unless you see an emerging pattern, it might be too early to present a feedback. Unless you want to risk it, you can sometimes, instantly you can give a feedback. But many times you see a little pattern and you bring that as a feedback to the client. And it's very direct, at the same time respectful. So I think we discussed two kinds of opportunity. One is from the environment, which Sabri mentioned. The ecosystem provides feedback that need to be processed. And the other is that as a coach, what you directly see in the coaching session. We know that we are,
just something that I got in touch with. And it's just so we don't fall into the trap of thinking of feedback only from what we euphemistically call constructive.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy for us to pick up incongruence because we're watching for it. We're watching for where the is slipping. But I also think if we just expand feedback, I know that very often the coachee is moved much more forward when I've also been able to share what I'm picking up as their diligence, their strengths, their persistence, even aspects that enliven and energize them to continue on this, versus just the incongruence between the say and do, etc. I think that's very critical, but I'd just like to add that it's also our role to stay alive, that feedback needs to be the whole spectrum.
Wonderfully said. Can't agree with you more. Absolutely. So feedback for positive attributes that you're seeing in the client, anything that is worth feeding back to the client, in other words. So that's a rich source that is unfolding in front of us in a coaching journey. We keep our communication direct and very lean. Okay, I'll give you an example of what's up on your screen now. Now we know that this is not really a good example of a direct communication in terms of word count, etc. So we will not do this. Perhaps a better version would be this. So it's also lean communication. It is devoid of much fluff. And we have earned the right to communicate in ways. Maybe you might use take a permission before you say, may I present an observation? And then say what you really have observed. So we keep communication quite direct, honoring direct communication. And the other part would be instant probes. This is instantaneous, as it suggests. It is a fruit of active listening in the moment with what the client is saying and perhaps what is he or she is not saying. And also watching the body language, especially if you're coaching face-to-face. Even on telephone, you can pick up, but it's much more, opportunities are much higher when you're coaching your client face-to-face. It is a slight shift in body language, sometimes not so slight shift. It could be a deep intake of breath before they answered a question that you presented as a coach. It might have landed as a powerful question. Or it could be a fleeting emotion across the face. Sometimes it's called a micro emotions. And I believe sometimes the eyes cannot catch it, but a high-speed camera can catch it. When you replay it, you see this very, very fast change in expression. It could be just a twitch. Sometimes you see it. Okay. And as you notice something shifting within the client, it could be in their breathing. It maybe they just shifted the way that they sat. It could be a deep intake of breath, or sometimes even an audible sigh, or just an expression as if a powerful thought has just crossed their mind. And we see this and we ask about it. We are probing instantaneously. Many times this sounds like this. Oh, what made you shift in your seat just now? Or what occurred to you just now? Or what did you process just now? And it's now. It has just happened. And it's only powerful when you get it in the moment, without any delay. And if we had not asked these questions, they would have processed something, but they would not have brought it outward, and we would have continued with our coaching effectively. But the minute you pause, you're helping the client to reflect on what is emerging for them internally. I'm going to stop there and ask a question. Any comments? How many times have you observed this, and how many times have you engaged with them? From your coaching experience.
Alan, this is Jai Shankar here.
Hi, Jai Shankar.
Hi. I have kind of utilized this often in my coaching practice.
Okay. And would you like to share with us?
The client takes a deep breath, or when he or she suddenly stiffens up, when you kind of point it out, the first reaction, you want me to share with you the specifics of a situation?
Anything you would like to share?
Yeah. So, okay. Now, there is this lady who was a divorcee, and she was kind of talking about her husband, her ex, and whenever she referred to her husband's mother, she would kind of stiffen up completely. You know? And what she wants between she beginning to say something and actually saying something, there will be a long gap.
Okay.
So I once said, oh, I see you stiffening up whenever you're talking about this lady now. Am I? The first response was, am I?
Wow.
Did you say that? Am I doing that? I said, and then she shot back. You mean I do that only when I talk about her?
Mm-hmm.
I said, I have seen this when you're talking about her, and so I'm just pointing this out to you. What's happening to you when you're talking about her? And that began a whole, it changed the entire direction of the conversation. She kind of realized that the actual problem was not her husband, it was her husband's mother. So very, very young marriage, but then she kind of realized it was not the husband and the husband's mother. And then a little later in the conversation, she came up and said, how did I look when I was talking about my husband? Suddenly this body language thing kind of caught up. How did I look like when I was talking about him? I said, that was very different. I did not see those signals about you referring to your mother-in-law when you were talking about your husband. And she said, really? Okay. So that kind of help. It was a very helpful observation in that conversation. So it really helps.
Hey, thank you very much for sharing that, Jayashankar. Absolutely. It's a great example of instant probe. And it can shift the direction of coaching. It can bring to the surface deeper situations that need to be addressed. Yeah. And brings greater awareness. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, coaches. So as we move forward with another facet of direct communication, we see a powerful one, which is reframing, and the second one, providing alternate perspectives. So as we can see, that alternate perspective is more a coach-centric, coach bringing certain perspective, neutral perspective to the client. Reframing, the coach can also help the client to reframe, but we normally don't reframe for the client, but support the client to reframe certain situations so that it can be processed further. Now, this we see that the need to reframe comes many times in situations where the client is painting a picture of desire, but they're not aware that they're actually figuratively framing it in immediate objection. So here is a simple example where somebody says that I would really like to learn to play piano, but I just don't have the time, or it is too late, or what if others will criticize me, or it's too difficult. Now, normally you will not find all these objections up front. You will find a primary objection up front where it says that I would really like to, but I just don't have the time. And then, of course, the context, if you ask, okay, tell me more, and you're going to see somebody who's really busy, okay, and they have this desire of wanting to learn to play piano, and maybe they were playing piano at a certain level before, now they're out of touch, they would like to bring that back into their life, but I just don't have the time. So normally you will only find one primary objection to the desire. The other ones which is mentioned here will come out only if you probe more. Okay. But normally they're aware of a primary objection. Now I'm going to stop for a moment and ask this great group, how many of us have dilemmas like this? Real ones, sometimes very minor ones, sometimes big ones. Whenever a dilemma saying that I would really like to do this, but you have a statement that we have been living with, okay, for some time. So I'm going to raise hand that I do have a dilemma like that. Okay, anybody else in this group who has got a dilemma, I would really like to just put your hands up on your participant table. Just want to see, am I alone in this group with dilemma, or am I in good company? I just want to check. Yes, Shabri, yes.
Me too.
Me too, okay. It could be sometimes minor things, very small things, but it's still a dilemma statement. Okay. Thank you for that. So sometimes it's just a very minor thing, and we may not really want to do anything about it. But sometimes it's a crossroad conversation. Or sometimes it can be a dilemma that has been with us for a very long time. Okay, it almost looks, dilemma means that it looks and feels, mostly, not only looks, it feels unresolvable. And it is theoretically correct because the desire is framed in objection. And we know the purpose of a frame is actually to bring the beauty of the picture alive even more. The frame should honor the picture. But you find that you have a powerful desire, but it's framed very poorly, which prevents the beauty of the picture from shining. It becomes a dilemma that is unresolvable because of the way it is stated. Now, if somebody says, I would really like to play piano, but I just don't have the time, logically, this cannot be solved. Because the second part, I don't have the time, is a truth statement. And we're not going to question it. The client feels they don't have the time. I want to, but I don't have the time. So what can you do? Nothing. Yeah, I can find time. That means the statement that I don't have the time is not so true after all. So I'm going to pause this and ask this group, how many of us as coaches have heard a dilemma statement when you're setting the goal for coaching, or it could be a smaller part of coaching where you ask the client, what is that you're really looking for? They say, this is what I want, but they have some objection. How many of us as coaches have faced this? If you could put your hand up, or if you would like to speak a little bit about it, it would be fantastic. I've heard it quite a number of times. And many times, people want to work with a coach because they have a dilemma. And they really don't know how to resolve it, or they try to do it on their own and they couldn't succeed fully. For example, I want to get to my ideal weight of 73 kgs in 6 months' time. I'm 80 now. But I just love sweets. And it's festive time, December, then New Year. My diet is likely to go for a toss unless I'm very, very careful and disciplined. And many times I'm not. So it could be a dilemma. How do I survive this festive season coming out, honoring my own commitment to my own good health? It could be a small dilemma. So many times we find as coaches, the client is not really able to crack it because the way it is being represented in their mind. Because the minute they talk about their desire, the objection to the desire is married to it. They're attached to it. It's a single statement. Cannot be even separated as two statements. It's a but statement. And direct communication is used to help the client to reframe in a way that we can actually work towards a resolution. So if any of the coaches on this call had a personal experience that you would like to share, we would love to hear from you about just a dilemma statement and if next step, how the client kind of rephrased it. Okay, so I'm going to invite you to a very small personal exercise. We don't have to process this within this call, but there's a request. Please write down, take about a minute perhaps, and write down one dilemma that you have. It could be minor, it could be anything. I would really like to, most of it will start with the statement, I would really like to X, Y, Z, but ABC. Maybe just one objection. Would you be willing, just to write down one dilemma that is real for us? Okay, so if any volunteer would like to just share with the group a simple dilemma, that'll be wonderful. But it's your choice, it's absolutely voluntary. Okay, so my request would be that if you do have a dilemma, do some self-coaching using direct communication and see how perhaps you can reframe so that it doesn't become a dilemma, but it becomes a highly resolvable objective and an achievable objective. So an example of the previous case where you say, I would really like to, but the reframed one might look like this. Where the objections have been inspected. So as coaches, our direct communication, there are two strategies. One is addressed towards a desire itself. So when you say you really want to learn to play piano, what is really involved? How significant is this for you right now in your life? What's deeper and most significant for you in learning to play piano? How does it stack up as a priority for you right now? How inspired are you by this? So many of the direct communication would be with respect to the objective, the desire, okay, and kind of bringing out how serious the client really is about this, in other words. And maybe the client is really inspired, really motivated. It's a goal that they've put on the back burner for too long. Now they feel that they're missing out on this. For many reasons, what are the values that the client finds in achieving this goal? So one is to use direct communication to really bring out the color back into that monochrome image of wanting to play piano. Not wanting to learn to play piano. The learning part could be a little tricky, but I want to play piano. Okay, of course, then I need to learn. And that might have a little bit of a problem, but my desire is that I want to play piano, not I want to learn to play piano. That's a practical part of it. Okay, that's very inspiring for me. And the second line of inquiry or strategy is to surface and question, elicit and question the objections towards it. But I just don't have the time. Okay, tell me a little more about that. And the client says how busy they actually are, and they are very busy. And then the question is that as long as they don't change that statement, they will not be able to progress towards their goal. So we are hoping that direct communication either will bring out that this is an assumption which is not tested, or it may be real in some cases. They just don't have the time because they're going through a reorg or something major in their life. And perhaps this is not the right time to start learning to play piano. Maybe it is relevant, but it's not really relevant right now. And maybe we can pause it. Okay, maybe they have to wait till this year end. Okay, whatever it is. So sometimes those objections could be real, but we ask questions around that to really validate, is that an opinion or is it a fact? Okay, yeah, I am busy. I really don't have any free time. So questions around which might come out, say, okay, I know I don't have the time now, but I can find the time, but I'll need to reorganize a few other things. Okay, so that's possible. And sometime when you burst the first objection, maybe the second objection comes up. But come to think about it, I think I'm a little old to start to learn to play. I should have done it when I was 6 or 7 years. Am I a bit too late? What do you think, coach? Do you think it's too late for me to now start playing piano? Or I feel, no, I think I'm too late. I'm too old for it. Well, is it a belief? Is it a fact? Is it an opinion? Is it a generalization? Is it an assumption? We don't know, so we use direct questioning. We use direct communication to probe. Okay. And sometimes when you take care of that, maybe here, just to fill in the 4 frames, 4 objections have been put. Many times there aren't. Others might criticize, but I will enjoy. It's going to be very difficult, but I will get better at it as I start learning. So we use direct communication to help the client to reframe 2 aspects. One is really bringing out the desire itself in full HD color, and also put an appropriate frame around it, which will enable them to move forward. Because we know that what the dilemma does for people is that it prevents them from taking the first baby step. So this allows them to take that first baby steps. Maybe some of the problems stated are real, but we'll find a way around it. I'm going to pause there and check with the group for your own reflections and thoughts about reframing. Okay, so we move forward and we look at another aspect of direct communication, the same line as reframing. And that's about the coach presenting perspectives, neutral perspectives, objective perspectives. And we use words that describe that it's the coach's perspectives. Okay. Because we are moving into an area where it's our interpretation of the client situation from our own filters and our own life and our own model of the world. It's also about we using our intellect to analyze the client situation, which we normally not do as a coach. It could be a feedback that we want to provide. So providing certain alternate perspective where it begins like I feel, and then you really say what you actually feeling about the client situation. I feel you're too close to the situation. You might say something like that. I feel that you're allowing your emotion to cloud your judgment. But it's very respectfully said because, and your anticipatory bail is in this statement, I feel. And you're also showing the humility to say that it's only my feeling and I may be wrong. Okay. The way I see it is, or we provide what if, and question the client's perspective through a what if question. What if your assumption about this consequence is wrong? What else is emerging for you? Or let's look at it from this perspective. Imagine you are a fly on the wall. Or imagine a perspective shift, move them into somebody else's shoes and look at it from that. Or provide a direct perspective. And allowing, I think the most important part of alternate perspective is to consciously be detached to your own perspectives and your analysis and our own theories as a human being. To know that these are my perspective and not really also taking care that we don't get too attached to our own ideas and theories. And we are not pushing the client towards absorbing them as their own, but just presenting them. And sometimes with a little bit of detachment. I feel that is a risk that we take here or we face as coaches when you're providing alternate perspectives. I personally had learned it, that initially many years back when I used to offer perspective, I used to feel very attached to them. And subconsciously, I was actually pushing the client through leading questions to consider them, etc. And that was some years back, and I consciously grew out of that by detaching it. And the intention is only to provide, especially if the client is framing and seeing a situation in a way that prevents them from finding a solution or moving forward. So, alternate perspective, detached alternate perspectives, just offered and presented to them like a fantastic spread, a buffet at lunch. There are many things on offer, but the diner can choose what they want to eat. So just present it there. And we are not pushing them, they should taste it, but just offering them. So alternate perspective, communicating directly. And we are coming to the important part of direct communication, quite indirect, we discussed it upfront, is about the power of metaphors. And we said there are two ways that we are going to discuss metaphors. One is to see how the coach creates a metaphor in order to perhaps provide a different understanding or a perspective, or sometimes to convey a message. Not a very direct message, but an indirect message for the client's consideration. And the second part, working with the client's metaphor. So that's the other end spectrum, the indirect spectrum of direct communication. So at this juncture, I would like to just stop and check with the coaches here. What has been your personal experience with metaphors or similes or analogies, all these cousins out there? Would somebody like to just share some of your experiences?
Hi, Alan.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Ganga here.
Hi, Ganga.
I'm sorry I joined late. I just thought the seminar is starting on Monday, and
Okay.
I came back from a yoga session. I'm really sorry I missed out. Coming to the metaphor thing, I have found it extremely powerful whenever the client is stuck. Okay, so when, like, just to give one example, when I was coaching an entrepreneur, um, um, there was a lot of narration happening about what's going on in life. Then I said, would you like to summarize what exactly you're going through? So he said, Ganga, it's like I'm sitting in a box, a tiny cardboard box, and everything is closed. And that was the breakthrough. And then, okay, what would it be like to open the cardboard box and come out? So that's my sharing, Alan.
Wow. Thank you very much, Ganga, for that. Thank you. That was a great example of the client using a metaphor, and of course the coach working with the metaphor in a very appropriate manner. And it can be very significant because metaphors are the language of the subconscious. We know that the power of metaphor is really in that it works both ways. One is that it's a language of the subconscious. Many times the subconscious communicates through metaphors, imageries, sometimes quite abstract. And these metaphors comes without an effort to think and create and visualize and imagine. That's the work of the active brain or the cerebral cortex. That's imagination. But metaphors are an experience. It comes in an instant. Okay. So it is, number one, a doorway or a communication from subconscious. And it works the other way also. When the coach presents a metaphor, it can open a doorway to the client's subconscious. And we know as coaches that most powerful coaching happens at the subconscious level. And it's only the initial transactional session that we do, which happens at the conscious mind thinking, cognitive responses, answers, thought through, analytical and logical. But as we move into powerful coaching, and it can be even in the first session, the client is able to access their subconscious intelligence and their wisdom. The more powerful those changes can be, and more meaningful those coaching sessions can be for the client. Hence the use and the focus or the application of metaphors in coaching. So, what exactly is a metaphor? And how often do we use it? Do we think and use it, or it just emerges for us? It just occurs for us. In fact, as we look at metaphor, we think it's a kind of a unique occurrence, but it is really not. In fact, we use metaphors quite commonly to communicate. Sometimes it's so commonplace that we don't even notice that we are actually using a metaphor. So let's take a look at some few sample metaphors and maybe just briefly look at metaphors, similes, and analogies. You know it's a metaphor because it's instantaneously emerging. It's not created. It occurs. That's the number one stamp of a metaphor. Though we can also create metaphor by inquiry. but it comes instantaneously. So you'll find that metaphor, I think in the simplest definition that I have seen is A equals B. When you say A is equal to B, where actually A and B is quite different things. And you will find, for example, here coaching is a journey. That's a simple metaphor. So coaching equals mathematically journey. And then we infuse in different minds all the similarities and attributes and what happens in the journey to coaching. We transport the attributes that are known in some aspect to something else that we are trying to describe. Success is a heady wine. And then the person who said that, they got their own unique meaning for the idea of success. And if you ask, can you tell me, when you say heady wine, okay, yeah, it is. And then further information flows about the concept of success. What we also have to be very careful when we are using metaphor is that a metaphor that is very powerful for you, when you share it with somebody else, it may or may not stick with them. Sometimes it triggers their own metaphors. So take a look at, coaching is a journey. Now, for me personally, many imageries came out about coaching when you equal it to a journey. I'm just curious, what emerged for you when you look at this word? Coaching is a journey. Would somebody like to just throw up a few thoughts?
Hi, Alan. This is Shabri. Sorry, go ahead. Was it Jay or?
Gayatri, finish. I'll follow you.
Okay, this is Shabri. For me, the first thought that came to mind is the fact that there's a destination that's a desired place to be at.
Wow, there's a desire, there is a place to be at. Yeah. Look at that meaning which came out, with respect to coaching. Thank you. Jay Shankar, would you like to?
Yeah. I would say it in two ways. One, when I look at it from a coach's perspective, I actually feel you never arrive as a coach, because every coaching conversation kind of raises the bar. Basically, because in every conversation you come across newer depths that you did not experience before. So from that point of view, as coach, I am always arriving. It's kind of a journey. It continues. When I look at it from client perspective, well, there are people who get back in touch with me after 1.5 years of silence. It suddenly makes me realize, it never really ended. It's a journey. It's carrying on.
Okay.
They agree to some actionables, and then once or twice I follow up with them. Is this done? Is this not done? Or do you need any help? And then they say, I'll call you back.
Okay.
Now, 2 times I follow up and they say, I will call you back. I switch off. Now, there are situations when you come back after 18 months, 24 months and say, actually, it has taken me such a long time to work on that.
Wow.
But I think I arrived somewhere, so I wanted to share it with you.
Okay.
Yes. My God, this is interesting.
Really? Yeah.
Look, You won't believe me. Yesterday on my LinkedIn, I got a request from someone whom I coached 4 years ago.
Oh, wow.
He suddenly pops up yesterday on my LinkedIn and then says, "Hey, I want to talk."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "This is interesting." So I think never really, you never know when somebody comes back. When does a coachee achieve what he wants to achieve? I think it goes beyond the statement that he gives you in the beginning of the coaching call, actually. At the time of contracting, whatever he tells you is just the tip of the iceberg. It is a little bit.
Right.
As you walk along the journey, I think even for the coaching, the journey never ends, because it's about realizing one's own potential. And nobody can ever say that they've realized their potential completely. So statement, I think, holds for the coach and the coachee as well.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, just look at, what the same metaphor can bring very different set of thoughts and meanings in different minds. So if as a coach, you are providing a metaphor to the client, you might have a particular message in your mind, but what the client subconscious triggers, because your metaphor can trigger other subconscious, and what might emerge for them could be slightly different, or sometimes could be totally different. And that's also the risk of using metaphor as a coach, that the more we know the client and their context and their preferences, their likes and their dislikes and their interest, the better we will be when we are presenting a metaphor that it resonates positively with the client. So it's a bit risky to provide a metaphor at the early stage when we really don't know too much about the client and their interest. Now, I will share a very small example from my own life, but as a client, I was being coached by somebody, a wonderful coach. She's in Mumbai. And I actually brought up something that I discussed. I have this seesaw relationship with my own weight and my fitness and many of those things. So I said, I really want to be this time disciplined with my fitness regime and being fit and reducing weight and all those stuffs associated with it. So she knew me quite well, and she knew my hobby and my very deep interest. So she used it very effectively as a metaphor, which helped me to actually go through tremendous breakthroughs. And I'm deriving those benefits right now as we speak. So what she knew about me was that I'm a very avid Sunday biker. So I ride a super bike. I enjoy riding. I maintain the machine myself because I'm technically quite adept at doing that. I'm really a petrol head when it comes to bikes and cars. That she knows very well. And she knows that I'm also I've shared, I maintain these bikes myself. She also knows that because of certain back problem, I'm not advised to ride a bike, or travel in a auto rickshaw or something like that. But when it comes to these kind of passions, your brain doesn't work. It's always your heart. So I've been riding every Sunday, sometimes long rides, and really enjoying it. In fact, today morning was a wonderful ride. So she knew this background, and she used a metaphor. She asked me a question about biking. So I went gushing. He said, "How was your ride?" So I said, "Oh, this ride was fantastic." And she actually got me hooked into riding. Then she asked, "I heard you say that you really maintain your bikes very well." I said, "I really." And he said, "Why is that important for you?" I think it's important because these are very high performance, high speed machines. These are sports bikes. So if you're going fast, then your entire system, as far as the machine is concerned, should be absolutely perfect so that it will keep you safe. So she triggered with that, and then she brought that analogy, said, so if this machine is capable of this speed and it's got this potential, how are you looking after yourself in comparison with the way that you look after your bike? And then she took from the, and I was so hooked because of that metaphor of me maintaining my bike versus me maintaining myself and what I'm supposed to achieve. She connected with my vision at the age of 75. I'm 55 now. So she took me 20 years to the future and said, what do you see in 75? I said, I still see me riding. Okay. And then she connected back, and we had a very powerful session, very short one. I think it was just 15 minutes. But that was a very intelligent use of a metaphor which the client knew, the coach knew the client will get hooked on, because the coach knew the client's desires or their passions. So that's only risk. If she has used a metaphor that did not connect, then it will fall flat, because I will tell her also, okay, she might change. So I want to present that as an important part when, as a coach, you're presenting metaphor. Be careful how you do that, because sometimes it can also backfire. And that's okay. We will always pick up some new thread, but it may not work all the time. I would like to just pause and ask the group of coaches anything that you would like to share with respect to what we just now discussed. Okay, so the indirect side of direct communication, that's what we are discussing. Metaphors can be extremely powerful, because if you get it right, it straight goes into the subconscious. And it helps the client to use their subconscious intelligence to resolve their situation. Now, just a cousin of metaphor is similes and analogies. And you will see on the screen, you will find similes has got this trademark, because it uses words like or as in. So here you find an example. A coach is like a Sherpa. And then mostly you end up providing those similarities between a Sherpa and a coach. There will be a description following a simile. Whereas for a metaphor, there are no description. It is just presented to the client, and we await the client's response by asking a question. So I might say coaching is a journey. How does that resonate with you? And we see what's going to come up. But in similes, we are more directive. And many times we use similes maybe at the initial stage of getting into a coaching relationship with a client, where the client is not very familiar with coaching. You might use a simile to describe what coaching is and how it works, etc., by saying, hey, coaching is like a Sherpa. Just like, if you want to climb a mountain, you might enlist the support of a Sherpa. When you have powerful goals that you have set, audacious goals that you have set for yourself, people use the support of a coach to navigate, and we describe. So that's a slight subtle difference. Not subtle, it's quite a major difference between a metaphor and a simile. That metaphors are said and left, whereas similes most of the time are described a little more. And then come to the close cousin of similes, which is analogies, which from its Greek root means proportionate, something which is proportional to something else. It's more logical. The argument is more logical in an analogy. We use this in our daily conversation without even thinking. Imagine somebody says, riding a two-wheeler without wearing a helmet is like balancing an egg on a knife edge. And then, of course, we bring out all the similarities between them. So we do this. We're no strangers to that. So let me pause there and check for reflection from the group. Any comments, any questions about what we just now discussed?
Hi, Alan. This is Ganga here.
Hi, Ganga.
I was just wondering if you could take, one particular theme and then show all the three, whether it is the egg or the wine. Do you think you can do that?
Well, I am not sure. I'm sure we can do that, but let me show you something what I already have up on the screen. Let's see whether this works for you. Okay. So here is a practical kind of a application of a client created metaphor. Okay. So what do you see as you look ahead to the future for your new venture? Now you're triggering a metaphor by the choice of your words as a coach. And since you kind of triggered, you might get the client coming out with a metaphor, not all the time, but there's a chance. What do you see? So I see an ocean of opportunity out there. Now, this is a metaphor, which is the client has produced. And now we have to also be aware that some of the metaphors, which sounds like a metaphor, may not be really a metaphor. It could be just a figure of speech. It could be just a cliche term that people anyway use, but it does not really stir any strings deep in the subconscious. So, for example, a fly on the wall. Coaches use it for a different perspective, and we use it. A fly on the wall is a metaphor. Okay. But does it have strong subconscious connect? For me, it does not. Because it's a nice kind of a symbol. It's the imagery for me, but it doesn't have anything more. In fact, it's got certain slightly negative connotation for me. I don't consider myself as a fly on the wall because I don't like flies maybe too much. Okay. But I might use it. Okay, but it's not really a metaphor for me. So here, when you see something like this, I see an ocean of opportunity out there. It could be a strong metaphor, or it might be just a kind of a figure of speech. And our question is that using direct communication, what can we now say to build on this metaphor of the client? Let's assume it is actually a metaphor for the client. What can now we say which can help the client to build on this metaphor and go deeper with it? So we might, please go ahead.
I may be stepping back a bit, but I did send you a message also. Regarding the metaphor, I think one particular dimension which is coming to the top for me is metaphors can be very culturally sensitive. And when you're doing in a multicultural kind of coaching, I think one needs to be very sensitive and understand the context from the client's perspective.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very cultural, very individualistic and personal. Yeah, thank you for highlighting that, Ravi.
The second thing which I wanted to share, if you permit me, is you talked about, the aspect of coaching being a journey together. And what came to my mind was a book I read about 25 years back. I don't know the author, but I'll always remember the title. It's If You See Buddha on the Road, Kill Him. And in that, the first paragraph is all about who is the guru. And the definition there is a guru is somebody who doesn't show you the path, but says that, listen, I've been through this jungle, looked at various paths, they don't work. Let you and I explore another path, maybe that will take us out. And to me, that's a wonderful journey for a coach and for a client.
Okay. Yeah. Very powerful. Thank you. Thank you, Ravi, for that. Yeah, I completely agree with saying that it's very personal, very sensitive, and the cultural aspects of it, and very, very personal. Metaphors are extremely personal. What meanings it will trigger, we really don't know. If you are going to place metaphor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so I quickly just take this opportunity since we are on the screen. What Ganga asked, can we just kind of role play the same thing be said as a metaphor or a simile or as an analogy? Yeah, it's quite straightforward. For example, if you say coaching is a journey, it becomes a metaphor because it's technically saying A is equal to B. If you want to see it as a simile, you can say being coached is like going on a journey. And then the descriptors come. And that could be more like a simile. And an analogy for the coaching and the journey could be more a quantitative, proportional aspect of it. It could be very close to simile. So we are just splitting hair here. Okay, really. They're very, very close. But then you're putting logical argument, not argument, logical comparison. Just like in a journey, before you go on a journey, you should know where you are at and you should know your destination. You should think of the route that you're going to choose, how you should be prepared, what should you carry, what is the logistic involved, what if there are some obstacle. Just like that, you will do also for coaching. So if you go, that's a more analogy kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So,
thank you, Alan. This is very helpful.
Yeah, welcome, Ganga. Sure, thank you. So we talked about the importance of a metaphor. They're powerful, yet they need to be used with a lot of care. That's what the group came up with from the cultural aspect, the personal aspect. It triggers very, very different imageries from people's subconscious, but it has got the power to bring those imagery. That's what's important. So in this example, when the client say, I see an ocean of opportunity out there. And when you look at this ocean of opportunity out there, with respect to this, what is your new venture like? My new venture is like a massive ship, which is exploring. And what is the implication of this exploration? That could be just an example of the coach using direct communication by working with the metaphor the client is supplying. We also have to be very careful to understand that any metaphor stretched too far will break. Though we are saying A is equal to B, in reality it is not. A is A and B is B. So we don't take those as literary meaning. Okay. But we just help them to work with it and not draw too much connections. Just the client, check the client, how they're feeling. Are they feeling forced to drag and stretch their metaphor? Or they're comfortable and they're going into a flow state. Important part is that if they really move into the metaphor, you will instantly know by they're moving into a flow state with their conversation. It's almost as if now the coach has receded. The client is really tumbling with imageries and ideas and connections, and they speak a little faster. They're speaking without thinking. Because we know thinking is the act of the conscious mind, but knowing is the right of the subconscious. So we see that they're not really thinking and processing, it's just flowing. And the best strategy for a coach when the client is hit the mother lode of a metaphor is to stay out of the way and just silently capture it in your own mind and let them say everything that they really want to say. And many times we know people will self-coach. So we work with the client, direct communication, working with. Now, sometimes this example is about the client, the coach presenting a metaphor to trigger the client even further. So writing this book is like unraveling a mystery gift. You know, it's exciting and yet you don't know what will emerge next. And sometimes the client might say, yeah, exactly, you know, and they might pick your metaphor and run with it, or create a totally different metaphor. Or they might even say, no, not really like that, but like this. So they may completely throw away the metaphor that we presented, but they would have created yet another metaphor, which we can now further work with. So that's an example of the coach bringing or triggering metaphor, but bringing something forward. Okay, coaches. So we are coming to the completion of that part of this webinar today, where we were describing or exploring together different facets of direct communication. And I really acknowledge and thank you for your contribution by bringing in your own experience and your questions to this call. Now, we also do have, time for a specific question answer session. But before we move in there, I would like to present maybe a metaphor. So as you look at the screen, what comes to your mind? What do you see? Sorry, I couldn't hear you clearly.
I said Shabari had raised her hand or what?
Oh, okay, sorry. So Shabari, please go ahead. Sorry. And I would like to assure you this is not a trick question, just a question. As you look at the visual, what is this picture really about? I mean, what do we see?
Sorry. I think I'm having a little bit of difficulty in unmuting.
Okay.
My bad. To me, this just seems like smoke billowing from a room below.
Absolutely. Yes, some smoke coming out from under the door. Yeah? Yeah, that's it. So it's a whiff of smoke coming from under a closed door. And many times this is like this in a coaching session with our client. As we ask a question and the client responses, when we are listening, we also find there is something out there behind the door that we are not fully aware of. Perhaps even the client is aware of. Now, we see this, especially if it's a very faint smoke. It's your intuition which says that, the client is processing something, or there is something that is unsaid. or something that is not very clear, even for the client. And if it's a very dense smoke bellowing out, we will raise the alarm. Because, no, you have to check what's behind the door. There seems to be a fire. Maybe curtains are on fire. Let's call the fire brigade. If the smoke is intense, we will always take action on it. But when it's just a whiff, sometime as a coach, I might hesitate. Should I question this or just leave it? Maybe it's nothing. Or maybe it is something. So active listening as a competency allows us to see this little wisp of smoke. And we are not saying this as a negative thing that the client is concealing something from us, but we are just using this as an analogy that the client is saying something, but there's something deeper. And that came out from your active listening as a coach. But direct communication is about what you do as a result of you having invested in those deep active listening for the client. Imagine you have been invited to a party and this host is just an acquaintance. You don't know them very well. But you know them, that's why you're invited. And there's a lot of people in that house. It's a large house. And as you wandered looking for a washroom, you came to a corridor and you found this door. And a small whiff of smoke is visible under this. What might be the different response, possible response as a guest? And keep in mind, you don't know this host too well. You're still a little formal with this host. Because if you knew the host very well, your response could be different. But if it's very formal, it's just an acquaintance, and I might have different thinking. I might say, is it, maybe it's nothing. Maybe there's a fireplace there and people are there and it's completely safe. Or maybe something is smoldering. Maybe there's an electrical short circuit. So various responses. One is that we can use direct communication and go to the host and say, dear friend, I saw a bit of a smoke from under this room. I think you better check this out. Oh, is it so? Thank you. And he rushes and checks out and maybe find that it's quite manageable and innocent, or maybe you just saved that house. On the other hand, if I'm very formal, I'm not very close to my host, I might say, why draw attention to myself? Maybe it is nothing. Maybe I'll make a fool of myself by pointing out something like that. Maybe I should just, in my own interest, quietly depart. Or say to the host, sorry, I'm held up with something else. I need to leave now. And you exit. And you don't care what happened thereafter. So the normal response will be based on how much we are connected with that host. And in this case, it's our client. So when you have a deep connection with the client, trust and intimacy with the client, the slightest whiff that we see here and there, we have the permission and the right and the responsibility to point out. And that is direct communication. But in case, two things will prevent us from, as coaches, in communicating directly. One is that being proven wrong. And I'm working to maintain a kind of an imagery as a coach. And I feel that proven wrong is not going to be good for that imagery. Or I feel the client will misunderstand my intention. Or the rapport that I have built with the client might be lost if I bring this out. Or I just don't have the permission to go in and knock at that particular door. So let me do a very polite and safe coaching conversation. I will not challenge my client much. Many reasons prevents that we actively listen, we saw that whiff, but what we do with it is what is important in direct communication. And the essence of direct communication really is never to walk away with things unsaid, but said in such a fashion. It's direct enough, yet it's got a positive impact. And like it was pointed out, not just for things that the client is missing, but for also the great things that the client is doing, which they may not be fully aware of. Maybe certain attributes that they have, maybe certain strength that they bring in. That is truly commendable, and not complimenting the client, but bringing into the notice the importance and the implication of that for the client. Never to walk away with things unsaid. I don't know how many of us are coaches at the end of a coaching session, or when you reflect on a coaching session that day, from your intuition says, you know what, I should have pointed this out, or I should have said this, or I should have flagged that, but I did not do it. And direct communication is that competency which prevents us having that kind of a regret in the interest of our client. So with that, we are ready to move into our question and answers. That if you have anything that you would like to share with the group, we have 10 minutes more to closing. So who would like to go?
Alan, this is Shabri here.
Hi, Shabri.
I was just reflecting on something that you said, which was on the, when we were talking about the metaphors, analogies, and similes, about how not to stretch it because sometimes it may not really deeply resonate. And I was reflecting on the fact that to many of us, English is our second language. And that, statements like ocean of opportunities, fly in the wall, etc., may not necessarily deeply trigger an emotion because to a certain extent these are Western metaphors.
Right.
But I was just thinking that, if we could just dig into our own mythology, it's replete with metaphors, our own stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder whether that's, and I'm just curious, I'd like to throw the question open to others as well. Have you experimented with where you use stories from our folk tales, from mythology, from something which seems much more alive to us and much more closer to us?
Wonderful. We would love to hear from the group, a response to that question.
Okay, Shabri, I think I just wanted to share a conversation which happened just about 3 days ago, I think. There was this dilemma about, can I do a wrong thing, something which I know is a wrong thing to do, because it is done in a larger interest of something which is for a larger interest. So this question came up, and we kind of talked about it. I listened to the client for about 15 minutes on various perspectives he had to it. When I realized he wasn't going anywhere, I said, what do you think would have been going on in Rama's mind when he dealt with Vali, when he dealt the final blow on Vali? The way he did it, all of us know that he was hiding behind a tree, and he kind of aimed that last arrow on Vali. So I said, Rama doing that, was that dharma? No, why did he do that? The immediate answer from the other side was, I got my answer. That's it. The difficulty was in drawing a line between was in distinguishing a larger objective and between what was right and wrong to achieve that objective. So I think the metaphor there worked very powerfully well. And then later on, when I asked him what was the connection that happened for you, he said, well, number one, I realized even Ram goes through those, even Ram should have been through those thoughts that I'm going through right now. But then finally, what Ram chose to do is what I'm choosing to do now. I wouldn't go into the context of what it was, but then end of the day, it helped him find an answer within his own mind. That's it for me.
Thanks,
Thank you so much.
Jayashankar. Beautiful.
Thank you.
And Alan, I just wanted to thank you for drawing that subtle distinction between metaphor and a simile. The simple difference in the words is and like. It was kind of a sparkling moment for me because I've always used those two words very interchangeably.
Okay, thank you.
But now I think I'm going to have a choice to make between what is a metaphor and what is simile. I think that's been a very, very good learning for me today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, Alan. Ganga here.
Hi, Ganga.
The bike story was very powerful, and the fitness and the sports, and so that's a big takeaway for me from the session today. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Absolutely. So, coaches, it's been absolutely a privilege working with you today. I really look forward to meeting on interacting with you directly in some opportunity in the future. I'm sure it will come. And if there is any question that you would like to ask or connect later as a fellow coach, please do feel free to reach out to me. And I would also like to acknowledge the sterling work that ICF Bengaluru does to promote the case for coaching, the art and science of coaching in Bangalore. Very dedicated group. So really thank them also. So I would like to perhaps ask Gayatri to close this on behalf of ICF.
Hi, Alan.
Hi.
Jay here. Thank you so much, Alan. It was an enriching section. And,
My privilege. Thank you so much for your contributions.
and it opened lots of avenues. So thank you once again on behalf of ICF Bengaluru chapter, and there were some 9 participants, including me and you. It's a wonderful thing, and I thank all the participants over here, fellow coaches. So we want a request to all the fellow coaches. We want you to spread this from the next movement onwards so that we have more participation coming in. Once again, Alan, you had been our resource ever, and you have been so kind in taking this and presenting for us.
My
Look
privilege.
forward ahead in future, for more sessions.
Absolutely. My privilege. Such a privilege working with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a wonderful
Thanks,
day.
everyone. Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Gayatri, for this beautiful session.
Thank you so much.